Hi, everyone, and welcome to Studio Jake. I, of course, am your host, Jacob Airy. I'm going to throw out my usual intro because I've got a very special guest. She's a personal friend of mine and a friend of the show. Does digital media for the Center for Renewing America, and she is just a fantastic guest. I always love having her on. Please welcome to the program, Kingsley Cortes. Kingsley, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me. Always great to be with you, Jacob.
And it's always great to be with you because you always have such really sharp insight. You're very politically active, and I've seen you on Tim Pool a lot lately. I'm not a big Tim Pool fan. Anyone who follows my Twitter knows this, but congratulations to you because you always bring a really good foundation when you go on there. You always, in my opinion, every time I see someone that I like on Tim Pool, I'm always like, oh man, they're better than the entire Tim Pool panel. But I'm not putting words in Kinsley's mouth, by the way. That is just me saying this. But so send all your hate my way. My website has my email where you can send that hate. So anyway, Kinsley, welcome back, and I wanted to bring you on to talk about Sound of Freedom because uh, even though it's been in theaters, it's been comparatively to other blockbusters, it's had huge success. It's done so well at the box office. I last time I checked, it was at over $181 million against a very small budget. And it just resonated well with the audiences. And so before we go into sort of the media reaction to that, I wanted to ask you, why do you think it connected so well with audiences? It certainly subverts that trope that Christian films, which I won't say Sound of Freedom is specifically a Christian film, but just those more uh, good values, American value films, they tend to be troped as very cheesy, but this one kind of subverts that. Why do you think it connected so well with audiences?
I think it's a really powerful story. And I think that conservatives, for the first time, are really starting to kind of grasp how to be storytellers. To your point, I think so many, conservative films or Christian films that we've seen throughout the last 10, 20 years, they've been kind of stale. They haven't been creative. The production quality has been very poor. So I think, this movie was really a breakthrough in a lot of ways. It was beautifully shot, beautifully casted. The script was fantastic, and the story was compelling. I mean, I was sitting there in the theater, and there wasn't a dry eye in the place. It's just something that I think speaks to the heart of people and everyone can relate to. This is an issue that should really matter to every single, worldwide person, not just American. This is affecting us globally. So I think, there was a lot of unity in that message. And there was also a call to action. I think, and it was a subtle call to action because I think, to your point, again, you see these conservative Christian kind of stale movies often. They have an in your face call to action, right? Or an obnoxious thing you feel like you're being lectured at, or you have a homework assignment or something like that. And this movie, I think, in many ways, it just motivated you subtly. You were moved by the story. Your emotions were captivated. And I think that can be so much more activating for those of us on the right, because unfortunately, we've let the left kind of commandeer activism for too long, right? It's their hobby. It's what they all engage in on the weekends. It's what they do. And we just kind of, we work our 9 to 5, we go home, maybe we turn on some Fox News, we get mad about what's going on, and then we go to sleep, right? What are we actually doing to get engaged in our communities? And I think these kind of movies are going to push conservatives to do just that. So I'm really excited to see, the reception that it's had, not just in the United States, but globally. I know they're going to be premiering it in various countries throughout the world. So I'm encouraged by it, and I think all conservatives should be encouraged by it. And Christians, like you said, it's not a branded Christian film, but there are certainly messages there. And I know a lot of the producers, a lot of the cast, their faith is very important to them. So I think this is going to really kind of be a fire striker for our movement, and I'm really, really excited to see it continue. And that's the important thing, right? Continuing. We can't just let this be some movie that we see and we're moved by it for a week and then we forget about it, because trafficking hasn't stopped. We have to make sure that the success of this movie is only the beginning of the story.
It's so true. And I usually, and to be honest, I broke a rule I have with movies. I don't like to watch movies where children get harmed. I don't care if it's a horror movie, I don't care if it's a drama. I have broken that rule twice. Once with a movie called Trust, which was about a girl who got uh, violated by a map, and it's very it's a film that pulls you in. It's, kind of touches on the similar themes that Sound of Freedom does. And Sound of Freedom, this is the second film where I broke that rule. I just because I didn't feel like Trust or Sound of Freedom were exploitive, and they looked at the problem very seriously. And I think that what is one of the strengths of it. And on your point about conservative media, my good friend Paul Rowland, he just did Exemplum, which is an indie film. He made it on a shoestring budget. He did a fantastic job. You can watch it for free on YouTube and Tubi. I'm plugging him because it's the same category. He really puts good values in it, but he doesn't do the shove it in your face message like you were talking about with some of those stale films. And with in regards to Sound of Freedom, one of the things that I love about it is kind of it put really interesting dividing lines in the media. Now, I hate the mainstream media, the corporate press, as I like to call them. I know you do as well.
Yes.
And there you go. And it really showed who they were, because we're talking about people who were defending the film Cuties, which is a child exploitation film. They were out there defeating places like Arc Digital and Forbes. There a really famous critic named Scott Mendelson, who he actually blocked me because I called him out for defending Cuties. He blocked me on X, formerly known as Twitter, and it's interesting to see those same people go after Sound of Freedom and try to connect it to QAnon, which I think QAnon was a boogeyman, which I'm not saying QAnon didn't exist. It obviously did. But I honestly think the media turned QAnon into a boogeyman for people to be, it's, they're trying to make it like it was anonymous, right? Anonymous was actually causing harm to people. And Sound of Freedom in no way, shape, or form even references QAnon. It's just about this story about Tim Ballard. And even if you don't believe Tim Ballard's tale, I think Sound of Freedom does a good job of relaying the premise of it. But what do you think about that media reaction? Because they were trying to make it about politics when the movie itself isn't really political. It just looks at something that's happening in our world that is evil and says, hey, this is how we should stop it, how we can stop it. So why do you think there was such a visceral reaction from the media when it came to this movie?
Yeah, I mean, this was totally a mask off moment. The media actually sided with the pedophiles. That sounds crazy to say. It sounds like I'm exaggerating. It sounds like I'm some sort of, conspiracy theorist, but that's what they actually did, which is despicable. It's totally reprehensible. But I think, they've been kind of doing this subtly for many years, right? They've been pushing this radical gender theory on children, pushing, gay porn in students' libraries and things like that, and saying that it's okay, it's free speech. So I think the media has been a collaborator in a lot of this kind of satanic stuff that we're seeing fester in our culture. And Sound of Freedom, I think its popularity, they just kind of freaked out. I think it forced them to show their hand. They stepped a little bit too far in showing us their true end game, their true role, what they truly believe. And I think for us as conservatives, we need to be, totally awakened to what the mainstream media is trying to do. They are not in the business of truth. They are not in the business of facts at all. So we need to make sure, that we're combating their misinformation with the truth and with facts. And Sound of Freedom as a movie did that. The story was completely factual. The reception was completely legitimate. I mean, this movie had some of the best reviews I've ever seen on the internet.
Oh, including for me.
Yes, no, it was crazy. I had never seen, Rotten Tomatoes, just various Twitter people, Facebook people talking about how fantastic this movie was. I know tons of people who saw it multiple times. So I think, what the regime media wants ultimately is control. So when there is something that is so inspiring, that allows people to feel that they can make change, that they're not controlled, that's something that is fearful for them. So I think that's why we've seen this kind of movement to silence people who want to talk about Sound of Freedom. And they do it with the traditional tactics, right? They label you racist, QAnon, conspiracy theorist to try to shut you up. But fortunately, I think conservatives have been called that for so long, it doesn't really bother us anymore, right? I've been called a conspiracy theorist probably 100 times in the past year alone. So I am totally okay to be labeled that by the folks at CNN and MSDNC. I don't care what they think to begin with. So I'm just excited to see, the reception that this is having, the force it is becoming. And I think the media knows that they can't combat it anymore. And that is why they're so against it. And I just have to say, we need to keep pushing this story and this narrative again, because like I said, I think conservatives on the right, typically we get a win, we celebrate it, we're happy about it, and we kind of relax for a little bit. We have to pedal to the metal, keep pushing against these evil forces that are at work in our society, and keep fighting back. This is just the first victory in a long battle.
Well, and it's really interesting because it doesn't seem limited to the media itself. What I thought was intriguing was originally Sound of Freedom was not an indie film. 20th Century Fox was making it. Disney bought 20th Century Fox. Now it's just 20th Century Studios, and uh, they had to break away, fortunately, because Disney was just going to shut it down completely. But fortunately, Bob Chapek, reading the tea leaves, he's like, I'm just going to let them take it. I'm just going to let them buy it out. And that's when they went to Angel Studios. So it became an independent film as a result of that. And honestly, I think they're better for it. But uh, it just goes to show me, or it displays to me how Disney, which owns the corporate press outlet ABC, although I've heard rumors they're trying to sell ABC. I don't know if that's true or not, but I've heard rumors they're trying to offload it just because of their financial situation, that it almost became an anti-Hollywood film. So there was this big movement in the 80s. People like Roger Corman were a part of it, where they were making films apart from Hollywood. We're kind of seeing this happen again. We've heard Mark Wahlberg, he's starting his own studio, but he's basing it in Las Vegas. Dennis Quaid is starting his own studio. He's putting it, I believe, in Houston, Texas. At least Texas. I might be confusing Houston with Austin, but he is putting it in Texas. And I think that the success of Sound of Freedom has sort of uh, made people bolder in saying this. I'm getting outside of that. Uh, I love your take on that, because I'm not even talking about conservative films, but maybe just films that appeal to Americans as a wider audience. Do you think that? Do you think I'm right about that? Is basically what I'm asking. Do you think Sound of Freedom is going to lend courage to filmmakers to be able to do that, so they can tap into something outside of Hollywood and New York City?
Absolutely. I think that the public, filmmakers, screenwriters, actors, all of these people are really kind of tired of what Hollywood has been pushing in the past decade or so. You can't produce any sort of movie or TV show now that doesn't have a woke message, right? That doesn't replace certain characters with different characters to kind of appease, this indoctrination woke mob where CRT and DEI reign king, right? So I think, people are frustrated with that because it limits creativity, right? In many ways, I think artists and creators, the people that used to be kind of against the grain, they used to be the rebels, have become the machine in many ways. Now, they conform to the narrative that the DC cartel and folks in Silicon Valley want to portray, and there's no deviating from that at all. So I think, there are still true artists out there. And I would, mention the Sound of Freedom producer as one who want to be kind of anti-establishment in a sense. They want to go against these traditional studios who have too much control over the product that you put out, and they want to tell their own stories. And I think they're going to increasingly look to small studios to do that. And I think they're going to have better returns because, I talk to so many folks, young people especially, they're really frustrated with the types of movies that are being put out. It seems that there's a remake after remake. There's zero creativity. Everything is just totally radical leftist messaging shoved down your throat. It's impossible to watch, to be honest. So I think we're going to certainly see a shift towards these smaller studios. And I think we're going to see perseverance on the parts of these various creators and producers who want a product that is uniquely their vision and uniquely their own. And it's not just movies, right? I think we're seeing this in every space. We're seeing this in social media, people trying to start their own companies. We're seeing it in alternative shows and news sites like this one, where we're putting out different takes and different opinions. So I think technology has, in many ways, allowed us to do that. And conservatives absolutely need to utilize that stuff, because I think we were a little bit asleep at the wheel when Hollywood first kind of started to become a major force in our cultural identity in America. We kind of just let it happen. We let leftists take it over. And I think now we have a real chance to use kind of independent media, smaller studios, to figure out how to create art of our own. That's always been, something that conservatives have struggled with. We've kind of been the party of tax cuts, defense policy, things of that nature, right? We've never been the party of music or storytelling. So I think this is just going to be a tidal wave of that for conservatives who have stories to tell. They're creative. They need an outlet. And I'm super excited to see that. I think we need more of it. I'm so tired of these remakes of Disney movies where the princess is telling me she doesn't want to be saved by the prince.
Well, one thing that aggravates me about the sort of the modern crop of Disney remakes is if you look at because there was a live action 101 Dalmatian that came out, I think, in the late 90s where Glenn Close played Cruella de Vil. And then you look at the one with Emma Watson. So, and the one with Glenn Close, she is virtually identical to her cartoon counterpart. Every way, shape, or form. The one with Cruella de Vil, they give her this tragic backstory. They make it where, she's not really a bad guy. She's just misunderstood. Maybe she's using unethical ways to get to power, but she didn't have power, so she needs power. And so that's why she's doing it. And it's the rewriting of them, of the villains. They even did it with Hook, where before Hook he was jealous of Peter Pan's immortality, so that's why he went to Neverland, so he could figure out how to get it. Well, now it's, he was actually Peter Pan's best friend, but then he left, and so Peter felt betrayed, and wah wah wah. And it's like, I don't, and to me the worst was Maleficent, who forever was one of my favorite Disney villains. Her name is a dictionary word that literally means pure evil, and again, they made her some sort of Me Too analogy, as opposed to and they didn't change her into a dragon. Disney, you had one job. We all wanted to see her turn into a dragon, not her crow. And I really feel that the delusion of good and evil is something that we're seeing in woke Hollywood, but it seems the audiences are rejecting it. Peter Pan and Wendy was a failure. Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania was a failure. All of these sort of things where they're putting that messaging. And I don't want to go totally and say that the era of woke Hollywood is totally over. I think they're going to be stubborn and try to hang on to it. I actually heard a Hollywood writer one time say that he says he's anti-woke. I don't know where he stands politically, but one time he said, you've got to remember, they thought Trump was going to have 2 consecutive elections. And so they were planning a whole bunch of woke movies. And he goes, so we're going to probably have about 10 more years of woke. He said this in 2018. He said, we're probably going to have about, 2021 is when he said it. We'll probably have about 10 more years of woke before Hollywood finally is fizzled out. But although now I think they're going to use the strikes as a reason to cancel them, like they did with the Spiderwick Chronicles. They were going to do a woke remake of Spiderwick. But all that to say, do you see that with audiences the tide is turning? Because before they could just slap a label. This is a Disney princess movie. This is a Star Wars movie. This is a Batman movie. But and audiences would go because of the name recognition. But now it seems audiences don't trust Hollywood anymore. It took a long time. Took longer than it did with me and you. But audience are finally starting to catch on. Do you think that this is signaling that at least with the audience, the tide is turning?
I think absolutely. And I think, again, it's because these individuals who are trying to push this sort of radical left agenda have overplayed their hand in many ways. I think they used to be a little bit more sly about the way you did this. And this has been happening right since, the 90s. I think of Friends in particular. That was a story. We all fell in love with the characters, right? You loved Ross, you loved Rachel. Who cares if they're having a baby together out of wedlock and co-parenting, right? Because you love them so much, you're willing to make exceptions. So I think,
right.
For decades, what they've really done is put on screen these characters that are so relatable, so lovable. We just adore them. We're fans of them. So we begin to kind of, adopt what those people are doing and practice what they believe in many ways because that's becomes our idol, right? I think
Hmm.
before Hollywood, before mass media and all of this stuff, your idol wasn't someone on a screen that you didn't know that was a fictitious character all the time. But I think now, young people, they're looking up to Addison Rae. They're looking up to the young woman who's playing Snow White in the upcoming remake, Rachel Ziegler. And those are their idols. So what those people are telling them to do, they're doing. And I think that's a problem. And I do think that people are starting to wake up because it's gotten just so overt. It's gotten so obvious that they're trying to push this sort of messaging and this sort of agenda. So people don't like that. They don't want to be told what to do. I still think, as much as I get frustrated with, America under COVID saying yes to everything the regime told them to do, I do still think in the heart of every American, there is an individualism that really reigns supreme. There is a desire, I think, to be one's own master that's like unique to the American experience and the American identity. So I think, people are going to reject this kind of controlling messaging that we're seeing come out of these movies. And I'm encouraged by it. And I just hope that young people continue to hop on that train because I will say Gen Z is the one that we have to worry about. They're the generation that has been most influenced by this mass media culture. They've been most influenced by the radical left's messaging across, social media, through movies, through music, through all of that stuff. And it looks as though they're going to be a pretty radical generation. So I think, if we have family members or friends in that age group, we need to be encouraging them to seek alternate sources, to not always listen to that establishment narrative, to go see a movie like Sound of Freedom or listen to, a podcast that isn't on CNN's watch list or something like that. So I think just getting outside of the different controlled spaces and breaking into different ideas and experiencing different opinions, I think is really useful. And I hope to see a lot of young people continue to do that.
Yeah, and that is something that I have found interesting is especially with the lockdowns, we were all kind of forced under house arrest, and that's how a lot of people found alternatives on YouTube,
Mm.
on Rumble. And I honestly think the lockdowns had a lot to play in Rumble's success because people are like, oh, because YouTube, their algorithm recommends the same thing over and over again, right? So like yesterday, I watched a true crime documentary on YouTube. I wake up this morning, my whole front page is true crime documentaries, and that's not the only thing I want to watch YouTube. I just watched this one last night that looked interesting, and but Rumble's not like that. It's, in my opinion, they're a little bit more organic, and I really think with Hollywood being on strike, we're going to see an uptick in Asian content like we did last time. They are well, like during the pandemic, right? Netflix brought over things like The Silent Sea, which is really good. I put it on my list of non-woke TV shows to watch. That's how much I liked it, and I think we're going to see Americans go to these alternative sources, including folks like you and I, and like you said, Addison Rae and Brett Cooper and Chrissy Clark, all of these people who aren't just on some regime okay list, right? It's going to be those of us who do it. And one of my biggest critiques of the conservative movement, and I've argued with names like Andrew Klavan about this, is conservatives understand culture, but they don't understand pop culture. And there's whenever a conservative hears pop culture, they immediately seize up almost. And but people don't understand, and this is what I try to tell people whenever I go on a conservative podcast that might not be pop culture related, is Batman is an American myth. And you might laugh at it because he first appeared in a comic book. You may not like the movies. It doesn't matter. The audience does. And that's why pop culture matters. That's why alternative creators, like we were talking about Sound of Freedom, or singers like my man Zoe Rachel, and writers like my friend C.S. Johnson, and then folks like you who are on the digital media space and getting in front of it. Uh, what would you advise um, if someone is watching this who is like, well, I'm just inundated with sort of the approved stuff. What would you advise folks? Like, how could they find people like yourself or other alternatives to news and entertainment? What would you recommend for them to where would you recommend where would you recommend for them to go?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think it can be kind of overwhelming, especially even on the conservative side. You have a lot of different options. You're not really sure kind of what can be the best place to start. I always tell young people I would start with sites like Daily Wire. I think that they are great for kind of entry level conservatism. I would add PragerU there as well. I think kind of understanding the basic foundations, the basic arguments, I think those are two places that you should absolutely go. And then once you start to listen to various podcasts that those platforms offer, I think, you might hear something, a mention of a different podcast that's perhaps a little bit more niche. And then you'll kind of try to find your way in the conservative space and see kind of where ideologically you fit. Because it is honestly, there's a lot of different diverse opinions within the conservative space. You have more establishment Republicans, you have more new right Republicans, you have the, Trump DeSantis split. So it can be hard to navigate. But I would say just starting with the basic conservative principles that I think, Daily Wire and PragerU spell out pretty well. I kind of almost call them a gateway drug when I recommend them to a lot of different people who are kind of curious, they're conservative curious in a way. They don't totally buy what their professors are telling them in their leftist university. They think that there could be an alternate idea or argument out there, but they're not sure what it is. I always tell them to go to those two places and then check back in with me and I'll give them more, right? We'll get a little bit more radical. Maybe it'll be Steve Bannon's War Room or something like that next. But, I think that just getting those foundations is so important because people on social media, I think they're able to fake it in a lot of ways, right? You can just kind of write a pithy tweet that goes viral, but there's really no depth there. I see a lot of just surface level content across social media today. So I think having that foundation, that understanding of why we believe what we believe as conservatives is so important. And I also just tell people read more. I think so many of us don't read enough because we're consumed by all of this digital content. But we have to be reading, we have to be studying up, being knowledgeable about our country's founding and its history. So that we can correctly articulate, what America is, who it's for, why it's worth fighting for. And I think that's something that I think I want to see young people start to grasp more. I'm guilty of it myself. It's hard to find time to do that, but we need to set aside time to kind of study up because we are against basically a behemoth of mass media. We have, institutions on the left that control absolutely everything that people are faced with on a given day. The coffee shop that you go to has BLM flags, and then you go to work and you're in a CRT HR department, different kind of discussion or something like that. So you're faced with this stuff all day long. So I think we have to make sure that we as conservatives have the strong structure to be able to fight back against that. Absolutely.
All right, and last question: do you I'm sorry, what is a movie or television show that you are looking forward to or that you're enjoying currently? I'm curious.
Yeah, no,
We didn't
that's a
plan this
great
question.
question.
We didn't plan this question, so I'm catching her a little off guard. But I am curious.
Okay, no, I like it. I'll give you two. So I'm rewatching Downton Abbey right now. That is one of my favorite shows of all time, and would recommend it to everyone. People seem to think it's kind of a chick flick type deal, but I know a lot of guys who like it as well. It's just a beautiful period piece. You really can't beat anything like that. And then I'm excited to see Napoleon coming out this November. I think that's going to be fantastic. It looks awesome. Again, I'm a big lover of history. So I'm looking forward to that one. And I think it'll totally break away from the kind of woke mold. At least that's my anticipation from everything I've read about it and the trailer and all the interviews I've seen of the different cast members talking about the film. I think they're truly just going to stick to historically Napoleon's arc and kind of life. So I'm excited to see that one as well.
I have seen the trailer for that. That does look amazing, I have to say. Joaquin Phoenix, one of the most
He's
brilliant
awesome.
actors around.
Yes.
Yeah, so if it's a terrible movie, I will be surprised. It looks fantastic. You're absolutely right. All right, Kinsley, where can people find you?
Please follow me. I'm at Kingsley Cortes with an S. I'm on all the platforms, Getter, Truth, Twitter. And then my organization that I work for is at AM Renew CTR for Center. And we're on all the platforms. We're here in DC fighting the cultural war in the swamp. So we're putting out a ton of content. Please give us a follow as well.
All right, and thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed having you on as usual.
Thanks so much, Jacob.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that you'll give it a thumbs up, that you'll leave me a comment and tell me what you think, that you'll share it out with your friends, and of course, consider subscribing to Studio Jake. I cover all kinds of nerd and pop culture topics, including film, television, anime, comic books, and so much more. I hope that you'll also head over to my main website, StudioJakeMedia.com, where I have even more news, views, and commentary. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, head over to my locals page. That's studiojakemedia.locals.com. It's the best way to support me. I'm trying to build a little community there. I have exclusive reviews and articles, so definitely head over there and check it out. And I'll see you next time right here on Studio Jake.